Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome President and CEO of Providence St. Joseph Health, Rod Hochman, M.D.
Good afternoon. It's great to be here on our 100th day. This is our 100th day together. No pressure. What I want to do are three things in the next 30 minutes. I want to talk about who we are, what we're up against, and then where we're going. So first about the who, and then the who. For a lot of you I've known for a long time. Some of you are new friends that I've gotten to know. For myself, I've been, I think, in healthcare all my life, it seems. I started when I was 16 assisting an orthopedic surgeon in surgery, which is totally illegal now, but, whatever back then. And, kind of knew I wanted to do this for the rest of my life and be a caregiver. And so that's kind of all I've known. And along with that, the great thing is when you're married to another caregiver, my wife's a physical therapist. So she used to know that when I tell her I would be home at 6 o'clock, she knew that was generally 7:30 or 8 o'clock because what would happen on rounds and you'd get out of the hospital and everything else. And we've been together for 40 years. And I think for all of you in this room, particularly for folks that are caregivers, the strength of your faith and your family are kind of what really keeps you going. And it's an amazing organization that we have together. So as we have said, we're 107,000 caregivers, but the extended family of Providence St. Joseph with our folks that volunteer, our doctors on our medical staff, and others is close to 135,000 people. We're in across 7 states. And we do have, as some folks in this room will point out, 3 of the largest states in the country. Texas. Okay, they put the map up for me just in case. I don't need a teleprompter, but occasionally I just need the maps, right? But Alaska, Texas, and Montana, and the Alaskans will proudly tell you, I know they're back there at that table, that you could put 2 Texases inside an Alaska. But it does speak to the diversity of who we are and what we represent. And what I like to say, we're a Western health organization. And the key word being health. I didn't say healthcare, health. Because it's not just about taking care of people when they're sick, it's taking care of people also and keeping them well. What's interesting about us is that the other thing that I like to say about our ministries is that we go deep in every community that we serve. And what does deep mean? It means we serve people outpatient, inpatient, at home, in the hospital, and everywhere else in between. So if you look at where we are, we don't believe in being in one clinic or in one hospital. Those communities that we serve, we have a deep relationship with all of those communities. The other thing that distinguishes Providence St. Joseph Health is we are the only health system that has its own high school in not too far from here in Burbank, California. And, and some of you have heard me say this. One of the Wall Street analysts asked me why we keep the high school. And I said, because we need to know what 14 to 16-year-olds are thinking. And if any of you want a great visit, I recommend coming to the high school and spending a half a day or so with the kids. First of all, you won't understand their physics class. You'll be totally lost. We also have a university in Great Falls, Montana. I was just there on Thursday. We just missioned our new university president. So as a health system, we also have a 4-year liberal arts Catholic university as part of us. And then we have a very, very large housing ministry, particularly up in the Northwest and in Oakland, California, which really talks to, as we talk about social determinants of health, 2 of the largest social determinants of health are housing and education. So they actually really do fit with what we're talking about and who we are. What also makes us unique, we're in health insurance as well as taking care of patients. We have almost 1,000 clinics across the states we serve. So in a lot of ways, I think we're very, very unique. And we're not here, does size matter? Well, it depends on how that works. But what we really want to do is be in community with the communities that we serve and really be able to serve them well. So if you kind of look at the who we are, it's a really fascinating mix of clinicians, support people. I tend to use the word caregiver to describe all of our people, because whether you're the person touching the patient or the person that's helping behind the scenes, in certain ways we're all caregivers as we move forward. So I think, I'm tremendously excited about the health system we have. And when you kind of compare with others around the country, we seem to have a more unified purpose in terms of who we are and what we're trying to do. We did almost $1.3 billion worth of community service and uncompensated care last year as a combined entity. $1.3 billion. We served 750,000 more people than we did the year before. And many of those 750,000 people that we served did not have care the year before. That's the really good news. And that's kind of partly why we exist. On the other hand, the other part of that story is we got paid just about the same amount the year before as this year, even though we took care of another 750,000 people. So in there lies somewhat of an issue that we have to deal with. But the thing that I celebrate is the fact that we cared for almost 1 million more people. Now, we care for about 11 to 12 million people every year as our combined organization. I think that deserves... But I said we were going to do things. So, the other thing that we're going to talk about is what we're up against. So I already foreshadowed that. We took care of 750,000 more people. We got paid about the same, but probably less for every person that we took care of. But we took care of people who were not cared for before. But what does health care in the United States look like as we move forward? Almost 1 in every 2 babies that are going to be born next year in the United States will be born on Medicaid or Medi-Cal. 1 out of 2. Government insurance programs now cover almost 60% of the folks that we serve. As a country, we're spending about $10,000 per person every year on health care. And as all of you know, the coda to that is, how are we doing on health care outcomes? No matter how you cut it, if you look at the population as a whole, we come in about 25th. And I always say to folks, it's us in Costa Rica, we kind of battle it out. And that's, based on what we're doing with infant mortality, maternal mortality. And if you look, the numbers really overall as a country are not great. And then you look at the fact that we spend probably 2 to 3 times what every other so-called developed country spends on health care. So why is there this disconnect? Well, one of the things that's really interesting, if you compare France or Germany with the United States, and add up what's spent on education, housing, and health care, then it equals out. So what it tells you that if you look at other nations, they spend the other proportion of the money that they're not spending on health care on education and housing. And as all of you, as we talk about, those are incredibly powerful determinants of health. So we spend a disproportionate amount on health care, but not on some of the other areas like education and housing that other countries spend money on. The other anomaly that we have is that we spend disproportionately less on preventive care. So you look at vaccination rates, you look at all the things that are kind of the basics of care, we spend disproportionately less on those as we go forward. And that's also been an issue that we've had in the United States. And, as we've talked about, the Affordable Care Act was imperfect, but what a lot of us were frustrated a little bit with was that what we got was a health insurance bill, not really a health care bill. So we're hoping that as we kind of continue to work on ACA over each year, we'll talk more about how we deliver health care than how we insure it. And that the issues of, you can have health insurance and not get health care because you don't have access. So all of those are going to be issues that we're going to be profoundly interested in spending time on. But the nation as a whole has to get together on some of those issues, and that's kind of the world that we live in. So, when I think about the world we live in, healthcare it's a long journey. So I said we've been in business for 100 days. JFK talked a lot about 1,000 days. But if you look at the length of time we've been in business, it's about 160 years, give or take, as an organization. And what I always like to say, name another organization that's 160 years old, that's as big as we are, and we've got $20 billion of this and that and everything we have, that was founded by a group of women, our sisters. So I kind of think that's pretty cool. When I'm out with, when you're out with all these big corporate types, you say, well, we have a pretty cool organization too. We've got, all of this, but founded by women, long time ago, and we're still in business. You know how many organizations 160 years are still in business? It's like 0.1% that have been around that long. Now, no pressure on the group in this room because we want at least another 160 years for sure as we go forward. But one of the things that we're dealing with is things move a lot faster than they ever did. So my old boss, I used to kid him in Virginia and said, Dave, when you were a healthcare administrator, the biggest decision you had to make was whether we put donuts or bagels in the doctor's lounge. Because pretty much you got paid for whatever you did. We didn't look at quality. We didn't care about safety. We charged whatever we charged and got paid for it. We told people what their care was supposed to be. And that was everything was great. Well, the world's changed a little bit. So today we live in a world that things are transparent. So everything more and more is out there. And guess what? We're actually saying that the patient and family should be the directors of their own care. And guess what? People want care where they want it, when they want it, and how they want it, and that makes a lot of sense. So it's changed extraordinarily. And then I always like to say, we've shifted where we take care of patients, right? So as some of you know, I'm a rheumatologist, and I say this all the time. When I started in practice, we kept a total hip replacement patient in the hospital for 2 weeks. And now we do it as an outpatient, or we spend a day or two in the hospital. So if you don't think there's a tremendous shift in terms of where we are, we haven't been there. So I think I have a slide back there, if someone's going to put it up, about how quickly things are. So what's the concept of a billion? So really, 1 billion hours ago, we emerged as a species. 1 billion minutes ago, Christianity began. 1 billion seconds ago was the first IBM personal community. But 1 billion Google searches was like, this says this morning, it's more like 2 hours ago. So it looks at, what I like about this slide is it tells us a little bit about how fast things are moving and how quickly information is moving. And that's the world that we live in where we are today. So with all of that, what I'd like to spend the most amount of time on is, what's the vision for where we're going? So I'm pretty simple. I'm going to have 6 things on here. I usually keep 3, so we can put up what we've got. So we've got really 6 things up on here. So the first thing is population health. What it's trying to describe is how do we take care of large groups of people, understand what their needs are, and do it in a way that makes the most sense, using the triple aim that Don Berwick talked about, or what we more talk about, the quadruple aim. So we really want to take care of people in that way. And I'm not smart enough to do all this work, so Rhonda Meadows came to us. She was the chief medical officer. Is Rhonda in here? Or she probably cut out on my talk. So, oh, there she is. Okay, all right. So Rhonda was the chief medical officer at United Healthcare. And before that was in CMS, worked in the Medicaid program. And the thing that she will tell you, grew up on Medicaid in Brooklyn and became a Mayo Clinic physician. And I'm just honored that, she's our head of population health. But what she's focusing in on is how do we rethink Medicaid? Because like I said, 1 out of 2 children in the United States are going to be on Medicaid. And Medicaid and Medi-Cal will be part of what we do. But we have to think a little bit smarter. And what the term, again, is getting a little tired. How do we get upstream and help our patients before they become patients? And because that's really the strategy. So she's really designing a whole strategy around how we do Medicaid. Because each of the populations that we serve are a little bit different and have different needs. So the elderly, complicated Medicare patient is a little bit different. The millennial who doesn't want to come into our hospitals or our offices are different. So it's really segmenting the populations that we care for, but designing care for them in a way that fits them in their best way. So that's going to be a big part of what we're going to be doing, thinking, worrying about, and organizing ourselves. Some of it we'll do with our health plan. So in Oregon, we have 650,000 members of the health plan. We also have a health plan in West Texas. So that's also going to be part of what we do. And we've brought all that together under one umbrella to really do population health well. Now, what's more important, I think, in certain ways than population health is what we call whole person care. And, that has other terms, and we've used the word whole person care to describe what Dr. Byock is doing in the Institute for Human Caring, which is part of our organization, which looks at each person as an individual and what are their individual needs. Because we can talk about population health, but ultimately it comes down to one person at a time that we serve and one family at a time. And the concept of caring for the whole person is something that we're very comfortable as a health system. And, I think the rest of the country is catching up with us. But, maybe you should also think about the mind, body, and spirit while you're taking care of the disease or the illness. And that's something that we've been talking about for a long, long time, and I kind of feel others have caught up. And Dr. Byock has an incredible way of bringing that all together, but also bringing it together particularly as we're journeying through the last part of our lives. And how do we do that differently than we are today? So this is something we're going to put a lot of effort on. I think we've got a tremendous head start in this area. And I think everyone's starting to really think about how do all of these other pieces come together as we treat the whole person. I had there was a patient who was at the University of Washington. She was a professor at the University of Washington. She had breast cancer. She interviewed 5 cancer centers. And they all told her the same thing. We're going to give you this, give you that, give you this, give you that. The reason why she chose our cancer center was they actually wanted to treat me and my family. They were going to talk to me about what I needed. Did I need integrative care? What was going to happen to my job? Who was going to take care of my kids and while I was getting treatment? What was the best treatment for me? And how was I going to have care continuity long after I got my chemotherapy and my radiation and whatever else it was. So to me, I wish I had her on tape, because she really explained to you about what the essence of really caring care is, and how you treat the whole person, not just the disease and plug stuff in. The third area is what I call the digital platform and innovation. And as some of you have heard me say, the last two holdouts to this digital revolution are healthcare and higher education. And the digital platform is moving rapidly into healthcare, whether we like it or not. So the question is, do we embrace it and develop it, or do we try to fight it? Well, we're going to embrace it. And what it means, people say, well, Rod, if we do this digital thing, does this mean that we're not going to touch patients anymore? Digital is an adjunct to what we do, and actually can get us in touch with the people that we care for on much more of a 24/7 basis. So our goal in digital health, and you'll be hearing more about this from Aaron Martin, who came to us from Amazon. So we imported a whole bunch of folks to really help us do this. Because I have to say, for some of my colleagues, it would have taken us a long time to get there. And our folks that are in the space already really understand how to interact with people and how to get them to use the digital media. And today, we have applications that can help us manage our diabetes, that can help us manage our mental health, that can help us do a lot of the things in a very, very personal way. So for your information, I already hit my 10,000 steps today here. But this whole concept of how we feed information back, how do we get it, and then how do we use it for ourselves? Because on my digital record, I want my own health record. I want to be able to manage it. I want to be able to set up my own appointments, actually when it's convenient for me. I want to be able to interact with my caregivers. Today we have an application for moms that lets them help them manage themselves through pregnancy and post-pregnancy. So when they're having lactation issues, they can actually get their lactation nurse on their iPhone, see that person, and be able to be counseled at 2 o'clock in the morning when they're having a problem. That is what the world of digital looks like. It really helps bring people with us. The other thing that we've been doing is investing in organizations in the digital space that we think are going to be valuable to our patients. So a lot of you know this example. We have a company that produces Fitbits for 4th and 5th graders. And the folks at the Northwest region in Washington State, up in Everett, did a joint venture with the school district and with the insurance company to make sure that every 4th and 5th grader had one of these Fitbits. Now, it's not like mine. You can actually play games with it. It's exciting. And guess what happened? The kids started becoming more active. And guess what happened? They started losing weight. Well, we were really interested in this company, so we own part of it. So as we make them successful, we become successful along with it. So we're also looking at ways to invest in technology so that we can be growing with those organizations as we go. There's another organization that looks at social media to evaluate what people are saying about our doctors, our clinics, and our hospitals in real time. Not 6 months, from now, what do people actually think about what we're doing, but what are they saying about us today so we can react to it. So those are the things that we're really, really interested in being part of, that we think it's critically important that they're part of what we do. But that's the space we have to be in. And I've told my people, when I want to order my vitamin D or my vitamins, I want to do it online on my Providence St. Joseph Health website and be able to get that. And it wouldn't be a bad thing for us to get paid as we're doing that at the same time. So that whole space is really important to us. If you look, Rick Afable, who's our chief executive in Orange County, said, we're looking at this the wrong way. You know, Rick has said, if we just look at what people spend at our hospitals, we're not looking at what the health spend is on populations. And what happens is most of the dollars get spent outside of what we do in our hospitals and clinics. They get spent on other health remedies, they get spent on vitamins, they get spent on alternative treatments. What we have to think about is how do we recapture some of that? We have to be families and individuals' health partners for life. And the trick is for life. We need to really be their partner, not just when they're sick, and that they look to us to be their health partner. The fourth area, which is critical, is the whole world of genomics, but also looking at what the specific genomics and patterns are for some of the things that are most important to us. Alzheimer's disease, cancer, but particularly looking at cancer survivors and what makes them able to survive cancer as they go forward. And then looking particularly at the genomics of what keeps people well and how do we keep them well. One of the things that we've done is we've just put in a grant for a $100 million grant. It's called a MacArthur grant. There are very few of these that are given, and we've applied for that to look at the genomics involving Alzheimer's disease and what the patterns are. But this is a whole area that has changed what we're thinking about and how we think about healthcare. And it's almost like we've unmasked a whole area, and what Dr. Hood has done has looked at the intersection between computational science and biologic science. And when you put those together, you get great discovery about what we thought was the origin of how disease starts and where it comes from and who responds to what. And it's going to change our whole concept of how that works. So again, with that in mind, the Institutes for Systems Biology is our partner. It's part of us. Dr. Hood is part of us. And we really have one of the leading group of scientists in the country as part of our organization. And it's very, very unique because we're not a university, we're not UCLA, we're not USC, but we're able to have this basic science that will be an engine for a lot of the work that we do. And this intersection between our clinicians and our scientists is really, really important. The same way what we've discovered on the digital side is the intersection between technology and the people that actually give healthcare. Aaron has a great slide. It's a Venn diagram that shows technology people and healthcare people. And when you put them together, that's when you get magic. Because what we've seen are people, people at Apple feel they can cure healthcare. And occasionally they actually talk to someone in healthcare to actually work on it. So what we're trying to do is really combine the digital applications with the people that give and do healthcare to figure out how to do that well. And one of the programs that we have that Aaron will talk about is something called Entrepreneurs in Residence. So we take some of these Silicon Valley brainiacs, give them some health insurance and food, and embed them inside the health system. And guess what? They actually figure out ways to help us do our work better. The next one is near and dear to my heart is mental health, and that's our signature keystone for Providence St. Joseph Health. And as we announced 100 days ago that we were finally here and we're open and ready for business, the first thing we said is that we are going to make a difference in mental health and wellness. Because we saw that as probably one of the nation's largest, if not one of its largest, health crises. And as a number of you have said, there are 22 to 24 veterans every day that commit suicide. Depression is probably the leading illness in the United States. The World Health Organization has said that 39% of the disease burden is related to mental health and wellness. And it's been, for all the clinicians and all of us in this room, it's really been a travesty about how somehow mental health and wellness got separated from medical care. And we all know that that doesn't make any sense at all, and you've got to bring those back together. So with that, we started with a commitment of $100 million to establish the Institute for Mental Health and Wellness. And you'll be hearing from Maureen Bisignano, and Maureen was one of the people that created the Institute for Healthcare Improvement with Don Berwick. We've got her to chair our advisory committee for our institute. Our hope and belief is that the Institute for Mental Health and Wellness can do the same thing for mental health and wellness that the Institute for Healthcare Improvement did for patient safety and quality. Because I think we've all recognized a problem. The question is how to actualize what we do. And it really has a couple of things in common. One, it has to be related to communities, and it has to pick out some specific areas that are most impactful. And you'll be hearing more about this during the course of our conference. One of the most important things is that we just did a grant for $1.43 million in the name of the over 143,000 people that are part of our organization that is going to two areas. One is first aid for mental health, so it helps folks in crisis to deal with it, and then as aid to families with mental health disorders and problems. And all the funds from that will go in communities that are served by Providence St. Joseph Health. And you'll hear more about that as we go forward, but I think it's a real tribute to who we are as an organization. And last but not least is strengthening the core. And the core is what we do every day. The core is about taking care of the caregivers. So we talk a lot about taking care of patients and communities, but one of the things I think that distinguishes us as an organization is our commitment to care for our caregivers. And one of the crises that we have is the crisis that we have amongst our nurses, doctors, and frontline responders and clinicians, and the recognition that the stress and work that they do has been really underestimated. So we have a group that's working on compassionate care, but really focusing in on the caregivers to understand what it means for a nurse, a doctor, or another caregiver to lose a patient. And in the past when I practiced, if I lost a patient, I just go on to the next one, right? And really understanding what the impact of that is. What's the impact upon our clinicians of the electronic health record and how we do that? And how we've changed the caregiver environment. But the core is also making sure that we get the billing right, which I still don't understand, so I'm with all of you, that we get all of those things right that we do every day. And when I hear people say, well, hospitals are going to go, hospitals are never going to go away. But they're going to change. They're going to be places that are ICUs and NICUs and where we do complicated surgery. But we have to run them exquisitely well. They really have to be run well. So we're going to spend time on the core while we're spending time in some of these other areas. And I can tell you, if we do what's on this list, we will be very, very successful. But I'd like to close with a last slide. And I think this is a kind of metaphor for me. So on the left is a picture of a Guatemalan mother and her baby. And as you know, we do a tremendous amount of mission work in Guatemala in surgery, medicine, social. We work with the medical school in Guatemala. But really looking at the native villages in Guatemala the same way we look at communities in Oregon, West Texas, or Orange County. That we're concerned about what the health status is and that we're there for the long haul. So our core, in terms of who we are, has to be with the people of Guatemala or the people of Haiti, where we've helped to build a hospital. We can never forget that, because that's core to who we are, in terms of the poor and vulnerable populations in the world. But as anyone who would tell you that's been to Guatemala or done any work overseas, we get far more than we receive. We ourselves as individuals get so much from those experiences. And we actually understand a lot about how to give care at a much lower cost than we do in this country. But I think that's always going to be core of our mission. It's going to be core of who we are. And yet on the other side, as we'll be hearing from Dr. Hood, there's a little bit of splice of some DNA out there, is what's the science going to lead us to? And I would tell you that we can be a great health system if we can do care on the left and care on the right and bring that all together as a system. And I'm excited to know that we can do that as Providence St. Joseph Health. Thank you very much.